My name is Colin Stewart, and I found my grandfather's secret on a rainy afternoon in March 1987, hidden in a place no one had thought to look for 23 years. A reel-to-reel tape sealed in a watertight metal box, buried beneath the floorboards of his old workshop, wrapped in oilcloth and marked with a single word in his distinctive handwriting: truth. My grandfather, Malcolm Stewart, drowned in Loch Ness in August 1964. I was 3 years old. I have no memories of him beyond what photographs and family stories have constructed: a tall man with kind eyes and weathered hands, a hotel manager who loved the loch and spent his free time on the water, a husband and father who disappeared one morning and never came home. The official report said he'd taken his small boat out alone, despite warnings of an approaching storm. Said he'd likely been caught in rough water and capsized. Said his body was probably at the bottom of the loch, held down by cold water and silt, unlikely ever to be recovered. An unfortunate accident. A tragedy. Nothing suspicious. My grandmother never believed it. Until her death in 1986, she insisted that Malcolm had found something, discovered something, that had gotten him killed. But she could never explain what, exactly. Just that he'd been different in his final weeks, secretive, distracted, making strange phone calls and taking his boat out at odd hours. And that he'd told her, the night before he disappeared, that if anything happened to him, she should look for the truth beneath the tools. No one knew what that meant. We'd searched his workshop after his death, found nothing unusual. Just tools and boat equipment and the accumulated debris of a man who liked to work with his hands. Eventually, we stopped looking. The workshop sat untouched for years, gradually filling with boxes of family possessions that had nowhere else to go. I inherited the property in 1986 when my grandmother died. The house in Drumnadroshit, the workshop, the small dock where my grandfather had kept his boat. I was 26, recently married, working as a journalist for a newspaper in Inverness. My wife Sarah and I planned to renovate the house, turn it into our home. Which meant clearing out the workshop. I was alone that afternoon, sorting through decades of accumulated junk, when the floorboard broke beneath my foot. Not broke, exactly, gave way, revealing a hollow space beneath. And in that space, wrapped carefully and hidden deliberately, was the metal box. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a reel-to-reel tape, the kind used for audio recording in the 1960s. No label except that single word, truth. And beneath the tape, a letter addressed to whoever finds this. If you're watching this, if you found this recording and you're hearing my story, then you need to understand something from the start. What my grandfather recorded on that tape got him killed. What I did after listening to it nearly got me killed too. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready for the truth about Loch Ness. Hit that like button if you believe some evidence is worth dying to protect. Share this with people who understand that family legacies can be dangerous, and that some secrets span generations. The letter was brief, written in my grandfather's neat script. To my family. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and you found what I hid. The tape contains evidence that powerful people want suppressed. Evidence of something in Loch Ness that changes everything we think we know about the world. I made this recording on August 7, 1964. I was meant to hand it over to authorities, to let them handle it properly. But I realized they would destroy it, bury it, deny it ever existed. So I kept it. And I paid the price. Listen to the tape. Decide for yourself what to do with it. But be careful. The people who wanted it gone 23 years ago are still out there. Still watching. Still willing to do whatever it takes to keep this secret. I'm sorry I can't be there to explain in person. I'm sorry for the danger I'm putting you in by leaving this behind. But someone needs to know. Someone needs to bear witness. The truth matters, even when it's terrifying. With love, Malcolm Stewart, August 13th, 1964 inch. The date on the letter was 2 days before he disappeared. I should have taken the tape to authorities. Should have let someone official handle it, police, historians, archivists. But I was a journalist, and my grandfather's letter had said that authorities couldn't be trusted. So I did what journalists do. I investigated first, asked questions later. I found a reel-to-reel player at an antique shop in Inverness. Spent an evening cleaning it, testing it, making sure it worked properly. Then, on a night when Sarah was visiting her parents, I locked myself in my grandfather's old workshop, threaded the tape onto the player, and pressed play. Static at first. Then my grandfather's voice, younger than I'd imagined it would sound, slightly nervous. This is Malcolm Stewart, recording on August 7th, 1964, at approximately 11 p.m. I'm in my workshop in Drumnadroshit. What I'm about to describe happened 3 days ago, on the evening of August 4th, on Loch Ness near Urquhart Bay. I was closing the hotel for the night. I manage the Drumnadroshit Hotel. For anyone listening to this in the future, when one of our guests, an American tourist named Dr. Robert Hendricks, approached me in a state of extreme agitation. He said he'd been filming the loch at sunset and had captured something extraordinary. Something he needed help understanding. I followed him to his room. He had a 16mm film camera, professional equipment, and he showed me what he'd filmed. The creature was real. Not a log, not a wave, not a misidentification. A living animal, perhaps 10 meters long, with a serpentine neck and a body that moved through the water with clear purpose and intelligence. Dr. Hendricks was excited, wanted to call newspapers immediately, wanted to share the footage with the world. But I convinced him to wait. To let me make inquiries first, to understand who should see this, how to ensure it was handled properly. That was my first mistake. The tape continued. My grandfather's voice grew more strained as he described what happened next. Dr. Hendricks had agreed to wait 24 hours before going public. They'd planned to review the footage together the next day, decide on the best course of action. But when my grandfather arrived at the hotel the following morning, Dr. Hendricks was gone. Checked out early, the staff said. Left no forwarding address. Took all his belongings, including his camera and film. My grandfather had found that suspicious. Had tried to find contact information for Dr. Hendricks, had called the American embassy, had made inquiries, and had discovered that no one by that name had entered the UK in the past month. The passport Hendricks had shown at the hotel was fake. The man himself had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. But my grandfather had been careful. He'd made his own recording of the film footage, secretly, while Hendricks had been in the bathroom. Had used a smaller camera to film the images on the wall where they'd projected Hendricks' footage. The quality was poor, several generations removed from the original, but it was something. Evidence that couldn't be easily dismissed. I developed the film yesterday, my grandfather's voice continued. I've watched it 20 times now. There's no doubt. The creature is real. And someone wanted that evidence badly enough to send a fake tourist to obtain it, then disappear without a trace. I've made copies of my recording. Hidden them in several locations. This audio tape is my insurance, my explanation for why I did what I did. If anything happens to me, if I end up like that poor American who came asking questions about the creature back in '62, then at least someone will know the truth. The film footage is hidden. The tape suddenly cut to silence. Not the end of the recording, but an interruption. Then my grandfather's voice returned, different now, urgent, frightened. Someone's at the door. It's nearly midnight. No one should be here. I'm going to hide this tape now. If you're listening to this, if I don't come back to erase this, then... Static. The tape ran on for several more minutes, recording nothing but silence and the faint ambient sounds of the empty workshop. Then it ended. I sat in the darkness, my heart pounding, understanding with terrible clarity what had happened. Someone had come for my grandfather that night. Someone who knew he had copies of the footage. Someone who'd made sure he disappeared before he could reveal what he'd hidden. And somewhere, hidden in locations my grandfather hadn't lived long enough to document, were copies of footage showing the Loch Ness Monster. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't stop thinking about my grandfather's voice on that tape, about the fear in it when someone knocked on his door, about the fact that he died knowing something that someone else desperately wanted kept secret. Sarah came home the next morning to find me in the workshop, surrounded by the contents of every box, every drawer, every hidden corner I could find. "Colin, what are you doing?" "Looking for film," I said. My grandfather hid copies of film footage. Somewhere in this workshop, or somewhere nearby. I need to find them. I showed her the tape, played it for her, watched her face pale as she listened to my grandfather's voice. When it finished, she was quiet for a long time. "This is why he died," she said finally. "Someone killed him for this." "Yes. And if you find the footage, if you make it public, they'll come after you too." "Probably." "Colin. I have to do this, Sarah. He was my grandfather. He died protecting this evidence. I can't just pretend I never found it." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we search together. But we're careful. And we don't tell anyone what we're doing until we're ready. We spent 3 weeks searching. The workshop, the house, the dock, every place my grandfather might have hidden something. We were methodical, careful, documenting everything we found, no matter how insignificant it seemed. And we found nothing. No film canisters. No photographs. No evidence that my grandfather had ever possessed footage of anything unusual. Just decades-old receipts, faded newspapers, broken tools, and the accumulated debris of a life interrupted. I was beginning to think we'd never find it when Sarah noticed something odd about one of the dock posts. The wood was different and newer than the rest, even though it looked weathered. As if someone had replaced it but taken care to make it match the surrounding material. We examined it more carefully. Found that the top unscrewed, revealing a hollow interior that extended down into the post itself. And inside, wrapped in multiple layers of plastic and oilcloth, sealed against water and time, were 3 small film canisters. My hand shook as I opened the first one. The film inside looked intact, preserved by my grandfather's careful waterproofing. But I had no way to view it. 16mm projectors weren't common anymore, and I didn't want to risk damaging the film by handling it incorrectly. I needed an expert. Someone who could transfer the film to a modern format without alerting anyone who might be watching for exactly this kind of activity. This is where it gets dangerous. This is where I should have stopped, should have destroyed the film and walked away. But I couldn't. My grandfather had died protecting this evidence, and I owed it to him to see what was on those reels. Subscribe if you want to know what I found. Hit that like button if you believe some family debts can only be paid by finishing what was started. Because what happened next is why I'm recording this testimony from a country my grandfather never visited, using a name that isn't mine. I found a film restoration specialist through contacts at the newspaper, an older man named Gordon who worked out of his home in Fort William. He agreed to transfer the film for cash, no questions asked, no record kept. I delivered the canisters on a Tuesday morning. Gordon said it would take 3 days. I spent those 3 days in an agony of anticipation and fear, jumping at every unexpected sound, watching for cars that seemed to follow too long, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake by trusting a stranger with evidence that had gotten my grandfather killed. On Friday, Gordon called. "You need to see this," he said. "Come alone. And don't tell anyone where you're going." Gordon's workshop was in the basement of his house, a cramped space filled with editing equipment and film stock and the chemical smell of development solution. He was waiting for me, his face pale, a VHS tape clutched in his hands. "I've been doing this for 40 years, he said. "I've seen everything. Faked footage, manipulated images, clever hoaxes. This isn't any of those things." He put the tape in a VCR and pressed play. The image quality was poor, my grandfather's recording of someone else's footage, now copied again to VHS, degraded by multiple generations of reproduction. But it was clear enough. Clear enough to see what Dr. Hendricks had filmed on that August evening in 1964. The camera was positioned on the shore, filming across water toward the opposite bank. Evening light, the sun setting behind hills, casting long shadows across the loch. And there, in the center of the frame, was the creature. It surfaced slowly, the neck rising first, water streaming off dark skin. The head was small relative to the neck, narrow, with eyes that were visible even at a distance. The body behind the neck was massive, only partially visible above water, but clearly enormous. The creature held position for perhaps 30 seconds, its head turning slowly from side to side as if surveying the area. Then it dove, smoothly and deliberately, barely disturbing the water. The footage ran for another 2 minutes, showing the empty loch. Then it cut to a different scene, the same creature, but closer now, filmed from a boat. This footage was even more remarkable. You could see details, the texture of the skin, the musculature beneath it, the way the eyes reflected light. The creature passed within perhaps 10 meters of the camera, seemingly unconcerned by the presence of the boat. Then the footage ended. I sat in Gordon's workshop, staring at the blank screen, my mind racing. This wasn't a blurry photograph or a distant shape that could be dismissed as a log or a wave. This was clear, detailed footage of a creature that officially didn't exist. "Is it real?" I asked. "I've analyzed every frame," Gordon said. "There's no evidence of manipulation. The film stock is consistent with mid-1960s material. The degradation patterns match the age. If this is a hoax, it's the most sophisticated one I've ever seen, and I can't figure out how it was done with 1964 technology. My grandfather died because of this footage. Then whoever wanted it hidden is still out there. Still watching. And they're not going to be happy that you found it." Gordon was right. But I was past the point of turning back. I made copies of the VHS tape. Many copies. Sent them to friends, family, colleagues, anyone I thought might be trustworthy. Told them to hold on to the tapes but not to watch them unless something happened to me. Built my own network of dead man switches and insurance policies. Then I wrote the story. Not just about the footage, but about my grandfather, about his mysterious death, about the fake tourist and the hidden evidence and the 23 years of secrets. I wrote it as a feature piece for the newspaper, complete with framed captures from the footage, testimonials from Gordon about its apparent authenticity, and questions about why my grandfather had felt the need to hide it so carefully. My editor was skeptical. "This is career suicide, Colin. You know that, right? Even if the footage is real, you're going to be branded as a crank." The Loch Ness Monster story. "It's not a story," I said. "It's evidence. And it's connected to my grandfather's death. That makes it news." "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure." The story ran on Sunday, August 9th, 1987. Front page. The headline read, "Local man discovers grandfather's secret Loch Ness footage, and evidence OF cover-up." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Phone calls from journalists around the world. Television crews wanting interviews. Cryptozoologists insisting the footage proved their theories. Skeptics demanding to examine the original film. And, most disturbingly, several very polite inquiries from people who wouldn't identify their organization but were very interested in obtaining the original film canisters. I refused all of them. The original stayed in a safe deposit box. I would provide copies, but the source material remained under my control. For 3 days, I was the center of a media storm. Then, on Wednesday evening, everything changed. I came home to find my house ransacked. Not burgled, nothing valuable was taken. But every drawer had been opened, every cupboard searched, every floorboard tested. Someone had gone through our home with systematic thoroughness, looking for something specific. The film canisters were safe in the bank. But the message was clear: someone knew I had them, and they were willing to break the law to get them back. Sarah was terrified. "We need to go to the police." "And tell them what?" "That someone searched our house looking for evidence of the Loch Ness Monster? They'll think we're crazy. Then we need to leave. Get away from here. Go somewhere they can't find us." "Sarah, I'm pregnant, Colin." The world stopped. I stared at her, processing this information, understanding what it meant. We weren't just risking ourselves anymore. We were risking our child. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks. "I was waiting for the right time to tell you." "But there is no right time, is there? Not with all of this happening." I thought about my grandfather. About the choices he'd made, the risks he'd taken, the price he'd paid. About whether his death had been worth it, whether the truth he'd died protecting had mattered enough to justify leaving his family behind. And I realized I couldn't make the same choice. Couldn't risk leaving Sarah alone, couldn't risk leaving my child without a father the way I'd grown up without a grandfather. But I also couldn't let the evidence disappear. Couldn't let my grandfather's death be meaningless. So I made a different choice. I did something my grandfather couldn't do. I distributed the evidence so widely that it couldn't be suppressed. And then I disappeared. Part 2 will reveal what happened after the footage went public, who came looking for me, and why I'm recording this testimony from a place my grandfather never imagined I'd need to flee to. I had 48 hours before they would escalate from breaking into my house to something worse. 48 hours to ensure the evidence couldn't be destroyed even if they destroyed me. I called in every favor I'd accumulated in my journalism career. Sent copies of the footage to news agencies in London, New York, Tokyo, Sydney. Uploaded digitized versions to early internet bulletin boards that were just beginning to emerge in universities and research institutions. Mailed physical copies to cryptozoology organizations, marine biology departments, documentary filmmakers, anyone who might have the resources to study and preserve the evidence. I held nothing back. The footage, my grandfather's audio tape, the letter, photographs of the film canisters, copies of the fake passport Dr. Hendricks had used, everything. I made it all public, made it all accessible, made it impossible for any single organization to control or suppress. Gordon helped me. He had contacts in the film preservation community, people who understood the value of historical footage and knew how to protect it. Within 2 days, copies existed in archives on 4 continents, held by institutions that had no connection to each other and no reason to cooperate with anyone demanding they surrender the material. "You've made it impossible to bury," Gordon said as we finished the final mailings. "But you've also made yourself a target. They can't get the evidence back now, but they can make sure you can't provide context, can't verify its authenticity, can't continue investigating." "I know. So what are you going to do? Disappear? Take Sarah somewhere safe? Let the evidence speak for itself? And your job? Your life here? My grandfather gave up his life for this. I can give up my career." Sarah was packing when I got home. Not just clothes, documents, photographs, everything would need to start over somewhere else. She'd already closed our bank accounts, converted everything to cash and traveler's checks. She'd called her parents, told them we were going on an extended holiday, given them a story about needing time away after the stress of the media attention. "I've been thinking about New Zealand," she said. "It's far enough away. English speaking. Stable. And they have a shortage of journalists and teachers. We could build a life there. You've really thought this through." I started planning the day after the house was broken into. I knew we'd have to leave eventually. I just didn't know it would be this soon. We left Scotland on August 15, 1987. Flew from Edinburgh to London, London to Singapore, Singapore to Auckland. Paid cash for everything, used false names for the bookings, left no trail that could be easily followed. We were ghosts, disappearing into a world that was still large enough that determined people could actually vanish if they were careful. Before we left, I recorded one final tape. An explanation of everything we'd found, everything we'd done, everything we were running from. I left it with a lawyer in Edinburgh, with instructions to release it if anything happened to us. My own insurance policy, my own truth beneath the tools. The last thing I saw as our plane lifted off from Edinburgh was the Firth of Forth, grey water stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere north of there, beyond the clouds, was Loch Ness. And somewhere in those waters, the creature my grandfather had died to prove existed was still swimming, still surviving, still hiding from a world that had spent decades trying to capture or deny it. The footage went viral, or as viral as anything could go in 1987, before the internet made global distribution instantaneous. It appeared on news programs in a dozen countries. It was analyzed by experts who disagreed vehemently about its authenticity. It sparked debates, investigations, renewed searches of Loch Ness by teams who suddenly had new motivation to find proof. I followed it all from Auckland, through newspapers and occasional phone calls to colleagues who could be trusted. The coverage was massive, sustained, exactly what I'd hoped for. The evidence was out there, impossible to ignore, forcing serious scientists to engage with questions they'd previously dismissed. But there was also pushback. Organized, well-funded pushback. Within 2 weeks of publication, several experts appeared claiming to have identified definitive evidence of fakery in the footage. They had credentials, institutional backing, and access to major media outlets. They presented technical analyses showing impossible angles, inconsistent lighting, signs of manipulation that somehow every other expert had missed. The analyses were sophisticated enough that many people believed them. The narrative shifted from incredible evidence discovered to another Loch Ness hoax exposed. Public interest waned. The news cycles moved on. But I knew those debunking analyses were fake. Gordon had been thorough in his examination. The footage was genuine, or at least genuinely from 1964, with no signs of manipulation using period-appropriate technology. These new experts were lying, which meant someone with resources was orchestrating a disinformation campaign. Someone who couldn't get the evidence back but could try to discredit it instead. Then the letters started arriving. Forwarded through my lawyer in Edinburgh, addressed to Colin Stewart, care of various institutions I'd sent footage to. The letters were polite, professional, asking for meetings to discuss the historical significance of your grandfather's work or clarify certain questions about the provenance of the material. Every letter included a contact number with a UK country code. Every letter was signed by someone from an organisation I'd never heard of, the Institute for Highland Studies, the Scottish Historical Research Foundation, the North Atlantic Maritime Documentation Project. Official-sounding names that meant nothing when I tried to research them. I didn't respond to any of them. Didn't call the numbers. Didn't engage with anyone claiming to want academic discussion about footage that had gotten my grandfather killed. But the letters kept coming. And they were finding me, which meant someone knew I was in New Zealand even though we'd been so careful to cover our tracks. This is when I realized we could never truly be safe. That the people hunting this evidence had resources and patience that spanned decades. Subscribe if you want to know how far they were willing to go. Hit that like button if you believe some conspiracies are real and organized and terrifyingly persistent. Because what happened next proved that my grandfather's death wasn't random, wasn't isolated, and wasn't the end of their campaign to keep this secret. In November 1987, 3 months after we'd fled Scotland, I received a package at the newspaper office where I'd found work in Auckland. Inside was a photograph, recent, clear, taken with a telephoto lens. The photograph showed Sarah leaving our apartment, her pregnant belly clearly visible. And written on the back in neat handwriting, "We know where you are. We know about your family. We're not interested in hurting anyone. We just want to talk. The number is still valid." My hand shook as I looked at that photograph. They'd found us. Found where we lived, where Sarah went shopping, where I worked. They'd been watching us, photographing us, demonstrating that we weren't as hidden as we'd thought. And they were threatening my family. I called the number from a payphone, using coins, not wanting it traced to our apartment or my workplace. It rang 3 times before a man answered. "Mr. Stewart, thank you for calling. I was beginning to think you weren't taking our letters seriously. Who are you?" "My name isn't important. What's important is that we need to have a conversation about your grandfather's footage and the rather unfortunate campaign of distribution you initiated in August. The footage is out there. You can't get it back. You can't suppress it. We're not trying to suppress it anymore. That ship has sailed, thanks to your rather thorough dispersal strategy. But we do need to ensure that no additional material surfaces. That you don't have other evidence you haven't yet released. That this chapter can finally be closed. What do you want? A meeting. Face to face. You and me, somewhere neutral, somewhere public. We talk, we come to an understanding, and then you get to live your life without looking over your shoulder. And if I refuse, then the photograph I sent you represents the best-case scenario for how this ends. We would much prefer a peaceful resolution, Mr. Stewart. But we're prepared to pursue other options if necessary. It was the politest threat I'd ever received. And the most terrifying. We met at a cafe in Wellington, 2 weeks later. I'd insisted on the location, public, busy, far from Auckland where Sarah was staying with friends while I handled this. I told her I was meeting a contact for a story. She didn't believe me, but she didn't stop me either. The man was in his 50s, distinguished looking, wearing an expensive suit that marked him as someone with institutional backing. He introduced himself as Dr. Edmund Price, though I suspected that wasn't his real name any more than Dr. Robert Hendricks had been a real person in 1964. "Thank you for coming," he said, ordering tea with the easy confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. "I know this situation has been stressful for you and your wife. We'd like to resolve it as quickly and amicably as possible. You've been threatening my pregnant wife. That's not my definition of amicable. We've been demonstrating that we have reach and resources. There's a difference. The photograph was meant to get your attention, not to frighten Mrs. Stewart. We have no interest in harming anyone, Mr. Stewart. We're simply trying to manage a situation that your grandfather created 23 years ago. By killing him." Dr. Price was quiet for a moment. "Then, your grandfather's death was tragic. It was also avoidable. He'd been warned, repeatedly, about the dangers of possessing that footage. He chose not to listen. He chose to hide evidence instead of surrendering it. He chose to put himself in a position where accidents could happen. You're admitting you killed him. I'm stating facts about cause and effect. Your grandfather made choices. Those choices had consequences. We're hoping you'll make better choices. What do you want from me? Confirmation that the footage you distributed represents the entirety of what your grandfather preserved. That there are no additional film canisters, no other recordings, no material you've held back. Once we have that confirmation, once we're satisfied that the evidence pool is finite and manageable, we leave you alone. You build your life in New Zealand, raise your child, never hear from us again. And if I tell you there's more material, then we need to recover it. And that process becomes complicated. Much better for everyone if you can simply confirm that what's out there is all that exists." I thought about the 3 film canisters. About whether there might have been others, whether my grandfather might have hidden more footage in locations I hadn't found. I'd searched thoroughly, had been as methodical as possible. But I couldn't be certain. "I found 3 canisters," I said carefully. "That's all I found. If there's more, I don't know where it is. But you believe there might be more." My grandfather was careful. Paranoid. It's possible he created multiple sets of copies, hid them in multiple locations. But I only found 3 canisters. That's the truth. Dr. Price studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I believe you. Which means we have a problem." because your grandfather's associates may have possessed additional material. Material that could surface at any time, creating fresh complications. Associates. Dr. Robert Hendricks, the real Dr. Hendricks, not the operative who impersonated him, was a marine biologist from Boston University. He did film something at Loch Ness in August 1964. He did show that footage to your grandfather. And before he was neutralized, he may have distributed copies to colleagues or family members who we weren't able to locate. My blood ran cold. Neutralized. Dr. Hendricks died in a car accident in September 1964. Unfortunate timing. But these things happen. They'd killed him too. Killed the American tourist who'd filmed the creature, killed my grandfather who'd made a secret copy, and now they were sitting across from me explaining it with the casual tone of someone discussing weather patterns. How many people have you killed to keep this secret? I asked. As few as possible. We're not monsters, Mr. Stewart. We're custodians. Protecting information that would destabilize society if it became widely accepted as truth. Your footage hasn't done that. It's been successfully framed as another hoax, another ambiguous piece of evidence that proves nothing. But additional material, especially if it could be linked to reputable scientists or verified through modern analysis, could tip the balance. Could force acknowledgement that would have consequences we're not prepared to manage. Consequences for whom? For everyone. For the tourism industry that's been built on the legend. For the scientific community that's dismissed the possibility for decades. For the government agencies that have known the truth and chosen to maintain the fiction. For the creature itself, which has survived this long precisely because most people don't believe it exists. Dr. Price laid it out clearly. The organization he represented, he never named it, never confirmed it was governmental or private or international, had been monitoring Loch Ness since at least the 1960s. They knew the creature existed. They documented it extensively using technology far more sophisticated than my grandfather's 16mm camera. But they'd chosen secrecy over disclosure. Chosen to manage the legend, control the narrative, ensure that evidence remained ambiguous enough that belief remained optional. They'd suppressed some evidence entirely, discredited other evidence through disinformation campaigns, and when necessary, removed people who threatened to force the truth into public acceptance. We don't kill casually, Dr. Price said. Every death has been carefully considered, weighed against the alternatives. Your grandfather could have cooperated. Dr. Hendricks could have surrendered his footage voluntarily. They chose not to. They chose to prioritize personal principles over practical realities. And now you're asking me to make the same choice. We're asking you to confirm what you know, help us locate any remaining material, and then let this matter rest. In exchange, you get to live a normal life. Your child grows up with a father. Your wife doesn't have to worry about mysterious accidents or unfortunate coincidences. You're threatening my family again. We're explaining consequences. We would very much prefer not to pursue those consequences. But we will if we must. I thought about Sarah, about our unborn child, about the life we were trying to build in a country far from the loch and the secrets it held. I thought about my grandfather, about his choice to hide the evidence rather than destroy it, about whether his death had accomplished anything beyond passing the burden to me. And I thought about the creature itself. About whether keeping it secret really was protecting it, or whether the protection was just a convenient excuse for maintaining control over knowledge that belonged to everyone. I want assurances, I said. Written assurances that if I cooperate, If I help you track down any remaining material, my family is safe. Permanently safe. We don't provide written assurances. But you have my word and the word of the organization I represent. Cooperate fully, and you'll never hear from us again. I made a choice my grandfather didn't make. I cooperated. I helped them. And I've spent 37 years wondering if I was a coward or if I was smart. Subscribe if you want to know whether cooperation saved my family or damned us. Hit that like button if you believe some compromises are necessary even when they feel like betrayals. Because what I did next, what I helped them do, is why I'm finally breaking my silence after all these years. Over the next 6 months, I worked with Dr. Price's organization. I helped them track down my grandfather's remaining associates, the few people he'd corresponded with about Loch Ness, the hotel guests he'd become friendly with, anyone who might have received copies of evidence. I searched through boxes of my grandfather's possessions that I'd stored before leaving Scotland, looking for correspondence, notes, anything that might indicate where else he'd hidden material. We found 2 more canisters. One had been mailed to a colleague of my grandfather's in Glasgow, held unopened for 23 years because the man had died before retrieving it from his office. The other had been hidden in the foundation of the hotel my grandfather had managed, discovered during renovation work in 1988 and turned over to police, who'd eventually connected it to me. Dr. Price's organization recovered both. They also recovered footage that Dr. Hendricks had sent to Boston University before his death, locked away in archives, never studied, never acknowledged. They found a diary kept by a researcher in the 1970s who documented strange sonar readings. They located photographs taken by tourists that had been confiscated by local police at various times over the decades. They were thorough, systematic, and they paid me generous payments into offshore accounts, presented as research consultation fees. Blood money, essentially. Payment for helping them suppress the truth my grandfather had died trying to protect. Sarah had our daughter in March 1988. We named her Margaret, after my grandmother. We bought a house in Auckland, established ourselves in the community, built a life that looked normal from the outside. I continued working as a journalist, though I never wrote about Loch Ness again. Sarah taught at a local school. We raised our daughter in sunshine and safety, far from the grey waters and the ancient secrets of the loch. And I tried not to think about what I'd done. About the evidence I'd helped suppress after my grandfather had died trying to reveal it. About whether the 30 pieces of silver I'd accepted made me Judas or just pragmatic. I'm 73 years old now, recording this in 2024, 37 years after I fled Scotland and made my deal with Dr. Price. Sarah died last year, cancer, quick and cruel. Margaret is grown, has children of her own, knows nothing about her grandfather's secret or her father's betrayal. And I've decided it's time to tell the truth. The whole truth. The parts one distributed in 1987 and the parts one helped suppress afterward. Because Dr. Price died in 2019, and whatever organization he represented has either dissolved or lost interest in an old man living on the other side of the world. The footage was real. My grandfather's recording, Dr. Hendricks' original film, the additional material we recovered, all of it genuine documentation of a creature that exists in Loch Ness. Not a prehistoric survivor, not a simple animal, but something more complex than that. Something intelligent enough to have avoided definitive discovery for decades despite intensive searching. The organization that suppressed this evidence wasn't evil. Not exactly. They believed, perhaps correctly, that proof of the creature's existence would lead to its destruction. That the combination of scientific interest, media attention, tourist pressure, and governmental exploitation would make the loch uninhabitable. That the only way to protect the creature was to maintain doubt about its existence. But they were also protecting themselves. Protecting the decades of secrecy they'd maintained. Protecting whatever research they'd conducted without public knowledge or oversight. Protecting the control they had over information that should have belonged to everyone. I helped them. I traded my grandfather's legacy for my family's safety. And I've lived with that choice for 37 years. But I kept copies. Of course I kept copies. I'm my grandfather's grandson. I couldn't destroy everything, couldn't let the truth disappear completely. So I hid my own evidence, in my own locations, using my own methods. And now I'm releasing it. All of it. The footage I distributed in 1987. The additional material I helped recover. The names of people in Dr. Price's organization. The locations where they conducted research. The documentation of their suppression campaign. Everything. I'm doing this because I'm dying. The same cancer that took Sarah is taking me. I have months at most. And before I go, I need to fulfill the responsibility my grandfather gave me, the one I betrayed when I chose safety over truth. This is my final testimony. Colin Stewart, speaking from Auckland, New Zealand, in December 2024. I'm releasing every piece of evidence I've held for 37 years. Every frame of footage. Every document. Every name and location and detail of the conspiracy that killed my grandfather and threatened my family. Subscribe to this channel because what I'm about to upload will change everything. The footage is clearer than you think. The documentation is more extensive than anyone imagined. And the truth is finally, irrevocably, out. Hit that like button if you believe truth matters more than safety, that knowledge matters more than control, that my grandfather's sacrifice deserves to be honored by finishing what he started. Share this everywhere. Make it impossible to suppress. Make it impossible to discredit. Make it impossible to ignore. I found my grandfather's secret 1960s tape. The evidence of the Loch Ness Monster he died to protect is finally revealed. Not just revealed. Released. Completely. Irrevocably. The creature is real. The cover-up is real. The choice between truth and safety is real. I chose safety in 1987. I'm choosing truth now. My grandfather would have been disappointed in my first choice. I hope he would be proud of my second. The evidence is uploading as I record this. Multiple platforms. Multiple countries. Multiple redundant systems that ensure it survives even if I don't. By the time you hear this, the truth will be everywhere. And this time, no organization, no matter how powerful, how well-funded, how historically successful at suppression, will be able to put it back in the box. My grandfather died for this truth. I lived with this truth. Now the world gets to decide what to do with it. Watch the footage. Study the evidence. Ask the questions. And remember that sometimes the greatest betrayal is choosing silence, and sometimes the greatest courage is choosing to speak even when it's dangerous, even when it's too late to protect yourself, even when the only thing left is the truth itself. This is Colin Stewart's final testimony. The evidence is released. The secret is revealed. And the creature my grandfather died to protect is finally, definitively, proven to exist. Colin Stewart died on January 15, 2025. This recording was found on his computer, along with extensive files uploaded to multiple platforms simultaneously. The files included original 1964 film footage in multiple formats, audio recordings from Malcolm Stewart's tape, documentation of Dr. Edmund Price's organization, evidence of a decades-long suppression campaign in names, locations, and operational details. Within hours of release, the files had been downloaded millions of times. Within days, they had sparked international controversy, governmental inquiries, and renewed scientific expeditions to Loch Ness. The footage has been analyzed by multiple independent experts. The consensus is that it shows a large aquatic animal of unknown species, filmed in 1964, with no evidence of manipulation or hoax. Dr. Edmund Price was confirmed as a real person, deceased in 2019. His background included connections to multiple governmental and private research organizations. Several other individuals named in Colin Stewart's documentation have been identified and questioned. None have provided substantive comments. As of this writing, the creature has not been definitively identified or captured. But its existence is no longer a matter of belief. It is a matter of evidence. Malcolm Stewart died for that evidence in 1964. Colin Stewart lived with that evidence for 37 years. And now, finally, the truth is no longer secret. The Loch Ness Monster is real. And the world will never be quite the same.